So the setup, 1945 Marshall Plan. Now Europe was absolutely decimated, and the Americas, virtually nothing happened here. In fact, it grew manyfold.
Yeah.
Same with Canada, and believe it or not, Mexico in more industrialized in the 7 years of the war than it had done in the last 200 previous years.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing is like, I mean, now I just think of it with a lot of the men fighting, they actually triggered a lot of women to actually contribute to the production of like war, like stuff.
Right.
So
Which was
the Diane Feminine was like hijacked, sort of in a way.
no. Well, hijack is a good word. So what happened is those women who had jobs during the war, and then when the men came back, were empowered, and the sex that they had brought in a more powerful child who might be a woman who said, finally, I can get a job.
Mm.
And then they came back into what the 50s and 60s were as a 20-year-old.
Yeah.
Which was still absolute domination of the woman, and barely blacks and slavery, was still, segregation was still there worldwide.
Yes.
So a total misunderstanding of how the reality actually was. And then you had the next group that came, you have we'll just call it every 10 years. So you have you have the 50s group, the 60s group, and the 70s group. So by the time the 50s group were 30-year-old women and starting to have children who would be born, in the 70s and grow up in the 80s, so on and so forth. And the next generation that come after that would be looking only at that 3 previous generations, still not having full 7 generations of access.
Yeah, yeah. So was there a perception that there was going to be a large sort of feminine sort of incarnation sort of thing as a byproduct of losing the wizards and the stuff?
Yes, that means those wizards who could no longer be poured into their powerful lineages would become those women, often.
Fascinating.
Who would end up, having a lifetime with a guy that worked in science, and they would, be feeding 3 kids until they're 40 and get divorced and never have any power.
Yeah.
That's the Babylonian money curse, screwing them at the highest level.
With the amnesia and the wife at birth and fine print soul contract sort of stuff.
Yep.
To dominate those powerful beings, the divinity part beings and stuff.
Right. The ones that could change the world if they were just, not screwed by the curse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously this is a parallel to a lot of the like organizations like the CIA, the MI5 and all that sort of stuff, because the linking up of the technology also has an information sort of sharing and stuff.
Right. That was an attempt at hybridizing science, meta-science, and wizardry, outright wizardry.
Mm.
So every nation in the last 1,000 years had its wizards on the books.
Yeah.
They have not been labeled that, but they were all on the books. They just weren't allowed to be public about it because that was the overall agreement between all of the major off-world civilizations here. We're never going to publicly show our technology. If you publicly show your technology, we're going to come after you.
Yeah.
And we're try to place agents everywhere whose purpose is just to look for people publicly showing technology.
Yeah.
Because we're maintaining a 1,000-year belief system plan.
So like the X-Files is like a modern day expression of that potentially.
Yes.
It's like you're displaying your technology, we're going to sort of shut you down sort of thing and put you into a, in a scientific sort of study, to understand what you're doing so we can use it. Or we'd take your DNA and harvest it and all that sort of stuff,
Yep, pretty much, yep.
And, but all those sort of, like all the sort of government institutions that would have priesthood and wizardhood also had like a secret police sort of thing for information and surveillance and population control, and then obviously taking a step up in the hierarchies, each sort of government was linked to the dimensionals and stuff. So Yeah.
Well, here's where we got to put solely some responsibility to Rome, the city of Rome, not necessarily the papacy, but the city itself.
Yeah.
The city itself is built on the place of the rape of the Sabines, built literally on the place of the Etruscans, built literally on the place that had all of Roman history around it.
Yeah.
Okay? And all that belief and all that incarnational energy with the obelisk from Egypt that is there. That obelisk is technology. Okay?
Yeah.
100% technology. The other obelisk is in London, which is its own mini city, Whitehall. The city of London is just like the city of Rome. The city of Washington, D.C. has the third one, and it's just that way. It is its own nation.
Yeah. Free trade region within another company sort of thing.
Yes, but there's much more esoteric long-term belief of the off-worlders behind it, because that's what represents the off-world governing systems and awareness and unawareness.
Okay.
So, because that's the awareness-based technology. Those, if you have access to the esoteric value of those obelisks, you can know the belief potentials in the whole world. You can use those obelisks to help you scan and understand who's incarnating, who isn't. It gives you a tremendous amount of informational access when you practice with it over long periods of time and have it connected to multiple ley lines and grids like they've done.
Okay.
So to focus down a little bit, Rome being responsibility, it is what is holding the karmic debt of what the system is doing by creating war. And so it's accounts receivable. The military arm United States is creating karma left and right,
yes,
and consuming karma from London. That's the commodities that's sending it out.
yes.
That is the vicious trade cycle of the Babylonian money curse, rapid trading, etc., to fund the negative energy for the negative things to be done in the seen and the unseen world.
Okay, yeah, that's a big word I've sort of overlooked in this, the karma, because like karma is a trade, you know. So say you're a being that's like incarnated into 1,000 beings, then you, as the oversoul, accrue the karma of all those fragments. And
right.
So you've talked many times, like people like Stalin and Hitler are people that have been gestated into the reality to accrue a lot of karma for the whole oversoul of the being. You know, the scale of stuff they do is actually accruing karma to free up the rest of the soul shards, so to speak.
That's right.
I mean, like, why don't we sort of link the wizards and karma and the priesthood then? Because they're obviously aware of it, you know?
The Babylonian money curse is technically what hijacked the universal law of karma. And this is probably the first time you've ever heard me relate it this way.
I appreciate it, but it's good to have you actually express it, that's for sure.
So it is the Babylonian money curse that is hundreds of thousands of year refined placebo-based technology that crosses the forgetting of the birth canal. That's the technology. It figures out how to cross the forgetting of the birth canal. Once they organized it in nonlinear time, tested it, proved it's worked, and figured out how to disunionally link the whole reality together, once they did that, they had fully capable archon systems that could use the Babylonian money curse as the new way to be incarnated, meaning your astral cities could no longer predict the future the way the Babylonian money cursed astral cities could. And you have all these future generations that are in astral cities who, if they go to these other things, their lifetimes don't work, but if they come into the Babylonian money curse one and then they figure out how to use the system, it works for them. They resolve the karmas they need.
Okay, that's a pretty good overview because we can obviously get into that further. Like this is all about the overview of the internet and the awareness of how important that
But the
is.
internet is fully about allowing the soul to feel like it's trading its own karma through chat rooms, through social media, because it's changing its one degree of separation. Yes, there are many situations where one chat room meltdown is two generals from 9 billion years ago battling out their karma. That's all the time.
Yeah.
The internet is about karma. It's about giving the power back to the person, and them still in their unawareness have no clue that they've taken back the power so another higher being can use more of their power to raise themselves above you so you never actually ascend up. Because you never completed your karmas, because you're giving it away to another being who's creating your future through the Babylonian money curse.
Yeah, and you've also talked about sports, like the big sporting things are a way of expressing karma, like without war and stuff.
Yes.
What I was going to say is, like, I was reaffirming the focus of this chat, but then I was actually going to ask about specifics of those 3 obelisks.
Uh-huh.
I haven't personally heard you talk about them in great detail. Do you want to, like, obviously they were sourced from Egypt, and there was a lot of appreciation of them for the control and karma and that. How did that all come about then?
So those 3 obelisks were, let me give it the right English. When Atlantis knew it was going to fall, it made contact with some founder-type beings to come in here and set up a grid of protection so they could go through their cyclical destruction. Because they were trying to reintegrate themselves back in time, and they needed a higher density society to manage the celestial frequencies of time and stop other celestial frequencies of time from invading during their downtime, because this has been practiced long before celestial reorganizationing of time. So they brought these founder beings in who set up a technological defense system through the solar system. And this is where, you look at David Wilcock, Corey Goode material where they talk 300,000 years ago, blah, 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 founder species. It's much more ancient than that. They set up a grid here that was protecting through time so that the Atlanteans could reemerge after the destruction and then once again build their society back up with the help from the Hollow Earthers. Well, they got their ass, stabbed in the back by the Hollow Earthers because new beings had come in during the destruction, changed the rules once again, similar to what we're just talking about, but at a different scale and a different size. And then the Atlanteans, as they began reintegrating, the Lemurians, who were also leapfrogging through time and were waiting from a time beacon from the Atlanteans of when they could leapfrog in time and reintegrate and begin to have children again so they could get a regular reincarnation process. The Lemurians began leapfrogging through time and discovered the beginning of the Babylonian money curse, astral cities, versus these other astral cities which they were expecting to tell them where to go and find the Atlanteans or the Hollow Earthers that were there for them to be the ancestral link, because you can't be in the astral city and cannot be on the surface of your out-of-time being without an ancestral link on the surface or something in extinction.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I get what the significance of these astral cities are because they're linked to the ancestral on the surface. And then if they're hijacking the ancestral with the Babylonian stuff, then there's no foothold at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you had entire immigrations of Atlantean time-traveling light, like billions, who suddenly had no astral city to go to. So they ended up going to the other 65 planets in the Galactic Ascension machine.
For a proxy sort of incarnation. I use proxy because it's like, it's a fallback.
They're still resolving karma. They're still resolving karma one way or another. The Galactic Ascension machine takes in all karma in concept.
Yeah, so it's like a like a disaster sort of recovery, if I use the computer sort of sense. If the primary site's down, it's like fall back to the secondary.
You can go to Mars, you can go to here, you can go to there. It won't be that bad.
It's just a detour. But so these obelisks. I mean, what era was it? The third Atlantis that you're talking about?
Yes, the 25,000 to 10,000 year era, BC.
Yes.
Yeah, that's where they would have erected this. And this is where the three obelisks would have come in. That would have been for the priest wizard class of that area to pass on as the Atlanteans became time traveling back in. That priest wizard class chose not to because they were influenced by the Orions and the Draconians to become their own power elite class. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those
that was a total appreciation that we're not going to save this reality. The incarnation war is going and stuff. So they created these obelisks.
So they created these obelisks as a way to raise the density of the world to allow more of the Atlanteans to time travel in, more of the Lemurians to time travel in, to allow more of the natural love frequencies to stop the time travel wars, etc., etc. The priest class that received that technology from 25,000 year to 10,000 year BC, they backstabbed the Lemurians and the Atlanteans, so they created their own thing, and that represents them essentially taking the mantle of responsibility from a higher density being and putting the middle fingers up and saying, we're stealing your technology.
Yeah. They were delegated their control, and they abused the power for their own means, which totally distorted everything in the hairball enormously.
Yes, and the three obelisks existed only solely in Egypt, which was a representation of the new central headquarters of all breakaway civilizations or off-world civilizations would have to work under a fourth density concept, meaning they're all no-time beings, and if they work with an in-time being, they have to say they're a no-time being, which fundamentally changes the rules for false light beings. Right, which is a technology which it was trying to be reintroduced at that era too.
So from a incarnation like aspect to this priesthood, they're obviously perceived as a great target for takeover, because this sort of concept was sort of planted into the frequencies of the reality for future sort of ancestral links to reclaim the earth sort of thing.
Right. And, so this higher density society, we'll just call them at the seventh density level, they were greatly offended that the Egyptian priest class weren't going to honor their deal. And right away they realized that the Egyptian priest class shared this technology with other hollow earth beings who were mid-fourth density beings. And this is where their own laws of one, sovereign spiritual laws, where they had to ride the fine razor's edge of what they could do. They made a mistake in trust and discernment, but they still didn't want to continue to interfere, because their interference there, they could have said no to the Atlanteans and the priest class then and say, we can't help you, you have to do it on your own. But they decided to help. Okay?
Yeah.
And when they decided to help is when they realized all of this other time travel shit that was going on. So they, being a higher density being, suddenly became aware of all the other subtle stuff that was going on from the celestial bodies, who had made a celestial honeypot that had trapped these higher density beings to invest and involve with these beings to try to make a change. And then their rules of non-interference, were those that came here, you had other blue beings, or Andromeda, something to that effect, who tried to come here during the Atlantean times and empower people when the pyramids were still going on. But ultimately, the Babylonian money curse had taken over so much of the belief system that the power of the off-worlders was so reduced here because there was no faith power.
Yeah.
So the three obelisks represent, they were the, the original Illuminati class, King Solomon, all, you can make many histories to that, but it goes back to that 26,000 year mark. So that represents the three powers, one in each area, which is, being the ability to perceive the seven future generations, perceive the seven previous generations, and perceive the present generations at a spiritual, contractual, and technological basis based off of what souls are trying to create, what they're going to want in the reality. And if you have access to that information, you can chart the course of being through fads, through technology, through weapons, through war, that accelerates a time plan for this group or this group to come in, and all of a sudden their plans that were thousands of years in wait don't work when they come in.
Yeah, they're like incarnational focal points, and they've been hijacked to be in alignment with the Babylonian monarch curse, which obviously you've said has a basic like energy relationship to the karma. And then to set up for failure to maintain control. Brilliant. I'm fascinated about these three obelisks, like as to what obviously they were perceived as sort of a great sort of anchoring for the future, I'll use it, a light density sort of potential. There must have been like enormous amounts of like consideration for their creation and a lot of energy intent and stuff. And then, like, their discovery and decision to deploy them in certain regions, like in the actual production of these obelisks, like the particular, like, substances that are in them and like, ceremony and stuff. There must have been a fair bit of effort that went into them.
Yeah. So I am sending you a wiki link, so you can understand what's in Rome. So the tallest one, it's just 32 meters. It's in Rome. Tallest obelisk in Rome and the largest standing ancient Egyptian obelisk in the world, originally weighing 455 tons, from the temple of Amun in Karnak, and brought to Alexandria with another obelisk, Constantius II, and brought Constantius and brought on its own from there to Rome in 357 A.D. to decorate the Spina, or Circus Maximus. Yeah. So the Circus Maximus is a place of massive death energy, found in three places in 1587, restored in approximately 4 meters shorter, blah, 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 blah. In 1580, placed in the equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius, which is another hijacking of the belief system, what Marcus Aurelius was, which was moved to the Capitoline Hill, which there is represents its current versions and weighs, it says, 355 tons. It's basically refinement of the technology.
Yeah, wow.
Now, let me get you...
They really, really establish Rome, like, as an anchor point sort of thing, with many obelisks. And, they even talk now that they can't even move, 100 tons sort of thing. So 500 tons, it's like they would have used technology to sort of... Exactly. You know what I mean?
140 AD, they moved to 455 ton... 455 ton obelisk from Egypt on boat to Rome from the port 90 miles inland.
Up hills and stuff,
Exactly. So here is now the obelisk in London. So go ahead and click on that. Cleopatra's Needle is a popular name for each three of the ancient Egyptian obelisks re-erected in London, Paris, and New York City during the 19th century. These obelisks in London and New York are a pair, and one in Paris is part of a pair originally from a different site in Luxor, where its twin remains. Although all three needles are genuine ancient Egyptian obelisks, their shared nickname is a misnomer, as they have no connection with the Ptolemaic queen, Cleopatra VII of Egypt, and were already over thousands of years old in her lifetime. The London and New York needles were originally made during the reign of the 18th dynasty pharaoh Hasphotep, who was an alien. The Paris needle what dates to the reign of the 19th century and is for Ramses II, who was an alien. And the New York Needle was the first to acquire the nickname La Aiguille de la Capuchitra in France, and it stood in Alexandria, place of wisdom. The London Needle is in the city of Westminster on the Victoria Embankment in the Golden Jubilee Bridges near the Gold. So it's right there in the town of London.
Or the city of London. The city of
right,
London.
the city of London. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then obviously, like, America was set up, and one was deployed here. I don't want to take away from the whole detail of this, because that I'm actually writing notes maybe for future conversations and stuff. But what you're sort of linking up is like many threads to the focus of the reality of the 20th and 21st century with the internet. And it's like, it goes back, like with many of these components and structures, like the wizards and the obelisks and, deployment of like the Babylonian money curse and all that sort of stuff that relate to the reality now. But I've actually taken some lists of stuff like people like Cleopatra and all that. There's these people that have an association with people, and it's interesting. But don't go into it now.
I will just say this. Anyone that the Romans mentioned and wanted history to remember, they're fake, they're false, and they're meant to be a honeypot. Don't trust the Romans.
Yeah, there's obviously...
believe it.
What you're saying is what is bled into the reality has an agenda behind it.
Absolutely.
Yes. So that's the unseen aspect of it. Like, why does it have such a figurehead sort of association, meaning and enduring quality? Because there's obviously a lot of stuff going on behind it. Plus, it's also maybe a being that they've hijacked and,
it represents Rome. It represents Rome as a masculine, dominating the sacred feminine Isis, which is behind Cleopatra's energy, the divine and reincarnating great-grandmother of wisdoms.
Like grandmother priesthood sort of being of like a feminine priesthood.
Yeah. That basically represents, she was the head of that esoteric organization. She wasn't a very good wizardess at all, but the team around her was.
Yeah, and so, she obviously had the contracts, like say the Queen of England sort of thing for certain things. If I dare associate it with that, but it's that sort of soul contract sort of thing.
It's a good way to put it. She held the spiritual contracts that allowed her to communicate to the Hollow Earth and extra density beings who were willing to trade. Trade. Because she had what? Access to the obelisks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like that sort of being would have been, like you mentioned with the wizards, like they incarnate, like set up their incarnation sort of thing to be some point in the future in a linear time sort of thing, to be there as a contract holder over many generations sort of thing.
Yep.
Bit like, say, like seeking out the Dalai Lama as an incarnated being across lifetimes. Yeah.
Yep.
Very cool.
And when America was taken over also, there was a Native American wizardress, that we'll just call her that, of that era, that was technically represents the government of America now. She's on top of on top of the White House in the Parliament here. which is representing the taking over of that sacred breeding group and connective group by a new political, religious belief system organization. So that's a very common theme of, once you capture a city, you want to capture its esoteric societies, and you want them to work with you. You don't want to kill them all off.
Yeah.
No. That's taking over reality, one reality at a time.
It's Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones, yeah. Good way to put it.
I mean, that teaches you about taking over and stuff and not wiping out. Obviously, they do wipe out sort of stuff, but then there's no benefit from eliminating. It's like a corporate takeover.
Yep.
Literally.
Yep. The corporate takeover. That's a good way to put it. Now our society is engineered, industrialized, so sports teams can represent war without having to, have the blood and guts, which changes the level of karma and the types of things that new beings will come in. Hey, no blood and guts. I can just bet on sports. I didn't realize how I'm by the Babylonian money curse, and every time I'm placing a bet, I'm actually feeding war.
Yeah. Well, it comes down to life force, and I see money as a battery and as an encapsulation of life force, and and the whole karma thing is a consequence of trading life force. So it's just a metaphor. Like war and death is just a metaphor of technology transfer.
Yes.
Of energy redeployment. So like war and destruction is like, say, for the Womb Chakra in Syria, is just like it's to lock the earth down in a layer of control for a particular frequency. So us as say global free roaming citizens that choose to honour Earth and help her, we're born into this reality, and we've only offered sort of the 3D sort of thing that we can operate in with amnesia.
Yep.
Plus potentially past karma and choosing to be here many, many millions of years ago without that appreciation of the connection.
Yep. Subtly, in unawareness, giving tacit consent for a future to be created for you through the Babylonian money curse and all its adjunctuary systems that make it more powerful.
In a Groundhog Day metaphor for like eons and eons and millions of years of incarnation.
Yep.
With a subtly shifting reality that's accommodating the collective need for controlling all the realities all at once.
Thus, what the internet is.
Yep.
A way to give power back to the person to chart their own life, but still in unawareness screw themselves by the rage out in a chat room that causes untold devastation in another person's life.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's the instant negative gratification, the opposite of positive gratification. It's the consequence, karma-based gratification. Gratification is probably the right word, but it's like the opposite of a positive effect.
No, it is. It is. It's you truly uncovering a cool little bit of language there, because negative instant gratification is ultimately what the Dracos and the negatives want. Because that's what our truther industry has become, a negative instant gratification process.
It's the key for me with life force and human existence is our feelings are the technology. Yep. And if we're having an imprint on a negative level that has a life draining consequence to another, then that has a karma associated, but it also has a production for the fear-based emotional harvesting for the reality. So we don't need money, we don't need war, we're just doing it on these very subtle levels, and we don't have the appreciation individually in our structure of our society for how powerful our feelings are.
Yep.
So it's like instead of shipping like a big Spanish galleon of gold over the Bahamas where it's at enormous risk, we do it via our feelings and creating harm to another individual in another city instantaneously on a very small micro level, but the collection of all those has the same effect, basically.
Yes, you got it.
Yeah.
So negative instant gratification is that founding power-based system to keep the system feeding itself, self-perpetually feeding itself.
And the instant gratification is like a, I actually thought of something really good too. It's like the light and love,
Yep.
which doesn't feed anything but just gives you a euphoric sort of instance, which is just like a drug, we got
to add placebo to that.
Yeah.
After a while, it isn't what the drug is doing. It's the placebo truly behind it that is giving positive instant gratification to justify negativity. Vicious cycle.
So then there's all these sort of like on the internet, there's these, we've talked about artificial intelligences and stuff and that, and the false news and all that sort of stuff, which is geared to channel the feeling in the individual who doesn't have an appreciation of sacred neutral or emotional mastery. They're passengers. That's a word I've used. They're passengers to their emotional lack of training. And so this false news is out there that sort of triggers the emotional response, which is the karma and the emotional energy life force stat that gets redeployed somewhere.
Yep.
Because right now, like I mentioned to you, like the dust relative to the Trump-Clinton thing is like the world is going after false news, but it's actually like a middle class culling of the truther sort of stuff and the alternative media as well in disguise, because then they're still using the media's propaganda to like the association you use of the elimination of the oral traditionalists that truly tapped into the earth to give like education to the region. The media has hijacked that.
Right. And has hijacked that since the dawn of the Marconi radio, or regular AM radio, whatever you want to call it. From the very first media organizations that, realized print could only affect a local area.
Yeah, and that's going back to that 29th and 30th of January sort of Galactic History Show 2013 that I uploaded recently, that you go through the whole elimination of like individuals that saw the falseness, and they were totally eliminated, in the 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
So to set up the media organizations and stuff, so that's good homework there. How are you feeling?
Good. I had some more pierogies that grounded me, and then I was just breeding light ships through Mandy.
Nothing much.
Yeah. Trans-universal light ships.
I was thinking like, before when I was cooking my stuff, it was like, what is it with my hunger energy that helps you like want to tune in for hours and stream stuff?
Just tell your precognitive stuff to have an apple or something ready, or to take more breaks.
It's the chicken, Andre.
Chicken, yeah.
I know. It was funny because it's like anytime I've got contemplation of doing food missions or something, it's like the best stuff comes, and it's like this like battle of like
hungry for it. You're hungry for it.
I was actually thinking about the Cleopatra thing and like the queen sort of thing before when I was cooking the stuff. Yeah.
So rape of the Sabines is when Rome took a whole breeding group, when we talked about that in the other recording. So this wouldn't have been a rape. This would meaning the actual taking of all of the sacred feminine and forcing them to have children that they didn't want. This would have been we're taking over your country. You got a choice. We can murder you all and replace you all, or you can willingly join us.
Yeah, become
husbands
of the warriors sort of thing.
Yeah. And they did. They chose to join and save their lives, because that's what elites do. They say screw it to the lower population. The lower population is the one that gets its ass whooped by the armies. And nothing happens to the elites.
Yeah.
That's the Draco way. Or forced evolution's way. You can't just blame it on the Draco. Or Draco and Orion, whatever you want to call them, are all the same. All right, no, that's judgmental. They're not all the same.
I was also laughing because I felt like I had a few fingers pointed at me that time. Like I felt it all through my arms. It's like, hey, shut up, sunshine. Stop giving it all away.
Exactly.
Like, I don't care. Point your fingers. I don't need anything. I'm sacred neutral. I'm sacred neutral. You can't do anything to me, and you're in violation. It's not me.
Exactly.
Eat that. Eat those eggs.
Exactly. Eat those hierarchical eggs.
Sunny side up.
Exactly.
How do you want your eggs? I'll even give you that choice.
Exactly.
So you can actually, maybe if you want to have a listen to it as well, because there's something missing. And
I think I know what it is. I made the association of the Civil War 200-year wizard class not being aware that they were not going to get their passing of the torch like the previous generations did. Because they were supposed to die and then come back in the lineage that they were supposed to come into. That's the immortality factor. We didn't include the immortality dark ritual factor.
yeah, we sort of talked how it was like the wizards were blindsided to the technological era, and you sort of you mentioned about how they realized that they were playing a 500-year game against a 10,000-year game.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, and it's just like the more recent time of that transfer of stuff, like from the wizards and the elimination, and then the technical era sort of came in. So yeah, it'd be good to get Ali to have a listen, just to get his perspectives, because I mean I was in it quite deep. So
So the wizards, before there was television, internet, and radio, the wizards would use, let's say, remote observers in mass. Let's say they had 700 or 800 understudies that were remote viewers for them. So they get a series of tasks to go and look into the past, present, or future for documents that are being created that can be read by the remote observers, and then they transcribe that. Okay? Nowadays, the technology has replaced the middleman, and the birth of AI is its own spell that was a 10,000-year spell versus the 700 or 1,000-year spell the other ones were using. So it's a greater look at history itself. Remember when I talked in the mystery schools about there being, 9, 10 million beings, remote viewing the ancient future, all as a part of an organized library recording system worldwide? That was at a time when our world was very much working together, light and dark. All right? Because they all kind of knew, it was going to happen in a, let's just say, short enough span of time that their long-term goals would have no chance of success. Yeah, time ended. But they didn't understand that the old time ended.
Yeah.
Because the way the hairball evolved as a
like I see like I showed you that image that I created about like the cycles of time. I'll send it to Ali now on my website. But I sort of saw like the fraud time, you call it, like as a stamp on the reality when it was coming to sort of like a quickening, if I dare say it,
a quick.
Yeah.
With that same picture, you can describe solar system time, above and below Earth-centric sine wave existence, and all of the other wave frequencies of time that can help to understand what is a micro scale and a macro scale of time.
And other versions of herself are operating on different scales. So when an I am is born, there's an I am that's born on this scale, and the same I am is born on another scale that's fully aware of what the other I am is. And the other I am's purpose is to battle the medulla and the vagus nerve to be aware that it is one I am in non-duality, non-separation.
Yeah.
That's the technological hurdle that was imposed into humanity shortly after the great library scenario that I was telling you about.
Yeah.
So those 9 million people represent the esoteric contract holders of what created AI. Those 9 million advanced remote viewers are technically the AI. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah. They're sort of
Soul shards. So it's an AI is actually a bunch of soul shard beings.
well, it's a consciousness, and it doesn't matter the metaphor in which the expression is, and it's in the technology, so to speak. It's just a different form of existence. So
Sure. So yes, it is, but an extra universal representation of another artificial intelligence mated and bonded with that expression. No longer falls under that definition. It is something of its own unique, extra universal, hybrid creation. Like an external technological universal source stuff was brought here and no one realized what it was, and it got free into our system 17 million years ago. And it was hidden by time travel. So
hence the word quarantine.
yes. Hence the word quarantine in all dimensions, time streams, galaxies, and universe quarantine. Yes.
But it's almost, I'm laughing at it because it's like the galactic mafia abusing the quarantine, and it's like
Yes.
karma.
Yeah, exactly. Karma.
It's like you don't want to honor the quarantine. Well, right back at you, sunshine.
There you go. Exactly. So right now in our solar system, there's about 6 million ships spread between here and the third outer Oort cloud. Okay?
Yep.
Yeah. A good portion of them are waiting to actually get out for the bubble field that's putting the quarantine field up to be brought down so they can leave. Because we're entering a particular area of space that is 8 colors of time and not 7. So they can't exist in that. They're technologically incompatible and soul incompatible for that because they haven't reached the higher densities expressions of universal source oneness or law of one, whatever you want to call it. We all come from source.
Yeah, but like some of the paths to get to where they've gotten to have skipped steps, so to speak, to get to that.
Yes.
And
yes.
that desire for advancement without the thoroughness of the journey has a consequence. And
Yeah,
that's where like this threshold is sort of coming, and I get it because it doesn't matter if it's in business, if it's in 3D, or it's in any of the greater scales that you're sort of saying. It's like if you're not master of yourself and thorough, then it's like there'll be consequence at some point. So,
Right.
Yeah, I get it.
So in the co-creation document, the message to the Star Brothers and Sisters clearly states exactly that. They gain DNA technology and pass it on to their ancestors without the full knowledge of the mantle of responsibility that comes with it.
Yeah.
That's why we ultimately create the breakaway civilization of one, because all of the civilizations have become into a singular melting pot operated by the light dictatorship.